The summer of 1990 was thick with the scent of pine and the hum of cicadas in Cedar Hollow, a speck of a town in northern Georgia. I was 11, a scrawny kid named Sam Carter, with freckles like a star map and hair the color of wet sand. My world was small: our sagging farmhouse, the dirt road to school, and the endless chores that kept Mom and me afloat after Dad's heart gave out 2 years prior. Minnie Hook, then came the dog, and everything changed. He appeared at dawn, a scruffy mutt with a coat like storm clouds and one ear bent like a broken flag. He sat by our rusted gate, amber eyes fixed on me as I lugged a water bucket to the chickens. Minnie Hook, he wasn't begging or barking, just waiting, like he'd been sent with a purpose. "Shoo!" I called, waving a stick. We couldn't afford a pet, not with Mom's factory wages barely covering the bills. But he didn't flinch. His gaze held mine, steady and deep, and Minnie Hook, something in me softened, like a knot untying. By noon, I'd snuck him a crust of bread. By dusk, he was still there, curled up in the grass. "You're a stubborn one," I muttered, tossing him a scrap of bacon. I named him Shadow, not for his color, but for the way he stuck to me, quiet and constant. Shadow became my shadow, true to his name. He trailed me to the creek where I skipped stones, lay by my feet while I did homework, and slept under the porch when Mom shooed him out. "That dog's trouble," she'd say, but her eyes softened when he nudged her hand. Minnie Hook, Shadow had a way of melting even the hardest hearts. At 12, I was angry at Dad for dying, at Mom for working late, at the world for being unfair. I'd sneak out to the old barn, punching hay bales until my knuckles bled. Shadow was always there, his head tilted, never judging. Minnie Hook, one night, I told him something I'd never said aloud: "I miss him, Shadow. I miss Dad so much it hurts." He rested his chin on my knee, his warmth a balm to my ache. Minnie Hook, that's when I knew he wasn't just a dog. He was my confidant, my keeper of secrets. School was no better. Kids called me poor boy for my patched clothes, and I'd come home with bruises from fights I didn't start. Shadow waited by the gate, his tail wagging like a metronome, and Minnie Hook, each wag seemed to say, "You're enough, Sam. You're enough." By 14, life was a treadmill of struggle. Mom's cough worsened, a rattle that kept me up at night. I worked weekends at the feed store, hauling sacks for pennies, while Shadow grew leaner, sharing our meager scraps. Minnie Hook, then came the storm, literal and otherwise. It was a Friday in '93, the sky bruised purple, wind howling like a warning. The creek flooded, swallowing our garden, and a tree crashed through the barn roof. Mom was at the factory, and I was alone when the power died. Minnie Hook, Shadow whimpered, pressing against me, his eyes wide with fear. I grabbed a flashlight and ran to the barn, desperate to save Dad's old toolbox, the last piece of him we had. Rain stung my face, debris swirling, but Shadow stayed close, barking at the chaos. Minnie Hook, then I heard it, a crack louder than thunder. The barn's beam was falling. I froze, but Shadow didn't. He lunged, shoving me out of the way as the wood crashed down. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, and found him limping, a gash on his flank. "Shadow!" I cried, cradling him. Minnie Hook, he'd saved me, risking his own life without a second thought. I stitched Shadow's wound with Mom's sewing kit, my hands shaking but steady. He healed, but his limp stayed, a badge of his sacrifice. At 16, I dropped out to work full-time, the feed store my prison. Mom's diagnosis came soon after lung cancer, too late to fight. Minnie Hook, Shadow became her guardian, lying by her bed, his eyes never leaving her. When I enlisted in the Marines at 18, seeking escape, I thought I'd lose him. "Stay with Mom," I told him, my voice breaking. His tail wagged, but his eyes were sad, like he knew I was running from grief. Overseas, in the dust of Iraq, I carried a photo of Shadow, his floppy ear smudged from my touch. Mom's letters dwindled, then stopped. Minnie Hook, when I came home in '99, discharged and hollow, Shadow was waiting, grayer, slower, but alive. Mom was gone. The house was sold. Shadow lived with a neighbor, but he'd waited for me, his tail thumping weakly. Minnie Hook, I knelt in the dirt, hugging him, and swore I'd never leave again. Shadow was 14 when his strength faded. His legs wobbled, his eyes clouded, but he still followed me to the creek, slower each day. I'd found work as a mechanic, rented a small apartment, and built a life around him. Minnie Hook, but time doesn't spare the loyal. One morning, he couldn't stand. I carried him to the vet, his weight light as a memory. "It's his heart," Dr. Lee said softly. "He's held on a long time." I nodded, tears falling, and sat with him, his head in my lap. "You're my best friend," I whispered, stroking his floppy ear. His eyes met mine, dim but warm, and Minnie Hook, in that moment, I felt his love, a force stronger than death. I buried him by the creek, under a willow, a stone marking his place, shadow, my heart. Minnie Hook, as the sun set, I swore I heard his bark, faint and free, echoing through the trees. 20 years later, I'm 45, a father to a girl named Lily, living in a modest house outside Atlanta. I'm a mechanic still, my hands scarred but steady. Minnie Hook, last year, Lily brought home a stray, gray, one ear flopped, amber eyes bright. We named him Shadow too. He sleeps by my chair as I write this, his snores a soft echo of the past. Shadow's stone still stands by the creek, and I visit when I can, Lily's hand in mine. Minnie Hook, each time, I feel him, the first shadow, his loyalty a thread woven through my life, binding me to love, to hope, to humanity.